Hello everyone, welcome to OSN Academy. I am Smita Singh, your mentor, and today we are going to talk with Unit 1 and Chapter 1, which is Food Science and Nutrition. So let's ready to learn a lot. So first we'll talk about what is food science. So food science is what? It is the applied science devoted to the study of only food. Okay, and there are various technologists who defined this food science. So you should be knowing what is the definition. The definition by Institute of Food Technologists says that food science is what? It is the discipline in which the engineering, biological and physical science are used to study the nature of the food that causes the deterioration, the principle underlying food processing and the improvement of food for consuming public. So this is the exact definition of food science, right? So the next term is the nutrition science. So what is this nutrition science? It basically focuses largely on the dietary concern, okay? The dietary concern and the health issues which is surrounding the food, eating and medicine. Now this nutrition science is multifaceted field that is rooted with chemistry, biology and social science. So you can see that it is a combination of so many fields and with many areas of specialization. Nutrition science also includes the study of behavior and social factors. Okay, so not only the eating habits but the social factors are also very important. So nutrition science is a multifaceted field and that is rooted with chemistry, biology and social science and with many areas of specialization. So and nutrition science not only includes the food choices but also the behavior and the social factors, right? Although these two majors are similar in that they both center on the food, that emphasizes on its implication, and also they are very much different. So nutrition science, nutrition studies is the relationship between the food and its effect on the individual health and comparisons. And food science is consideration to be chemical, biological and physical properties of the food. So there is a difference between the two terms, that is food science and nutrition science. Okay, food science specifically looks for the properties of the food, chemical and biological and physical properties of the food, and nutrition is the behavior, right? So now the most important part is the food. Let's know about what is food. And food can be defined as anything solid or anything liquid which when swallowed it is digested, assimilated and then it's been used by your body to keep it well. Okay, so it can be also defined as anything eaten or drunk which can be absorbed by the body to be used as energy sources, building, regulating or protective materials. And these three things are only the function of food. You can see it over here. Food provides energy for various voluntary and involuntary tasks. It provides material for growth, repair and replacement, and it also provides material to fight against disease and regulate organ system. So these are the three major functions of the food, and these three functions are important for you to know because there are various questions previously which came with this function of the food. So these are the three main food functions. Now we'll talk about another aspect, that is BMR. BMR is what? It is basal metabolic rate. Okay, so you should be knowing what is BMR and how is it been measured. BMR is what? The energy used by the body during physical, digestive and emotional rest, right? So this is very important, how much energy has been used by the body when the body is physically, digestive and emotionally rest. Emotionally rest means what? It is determined by 12 hours of after the ingestion of food. When you eat anything, after 12 hours, your body is on a resting stage. Okay, your body is doing nothing of any other metabolism in any increased metabolic rate. So after 12 hours of ingestion of any of the food, that energy is supposed to be basal metabolic rate. And this includes various activities seen in physical work and the work being carried out by the internal organ. Okay, so the basal, that is the basic energy requirement, is called basal metabolic rate. Now, among the various involuntary functions they are processing concerned with metabolism, they are what? Which are not in your control, that is involuntary. That means they are respiration, circulation, glandular activities, and also the maintenance of the muscles and bones. So these are involuntary functions, and these processes need some energy. The term used for them is known as basal metabolic processes. Okay. Now the energy needed is measured as energy used per unit of body weight. This is the unit of BMR. That is, energy used is what? Per unit of body weight per unit of time. That means kilocalories per kilogram body weight per hour. Okay, that is kilocalories per kg per hour. This is the unit of metabolism rate. Okay, and this is called what? Basal metabolic rate. So you should be knowing the definition. Now there are various factors which are very much important to determine this BMR, and they are what? The first one is the age. Okay, this is very important part of metabolic rate. The highest is during the first 2 years of life. That means if the baby's age is 2 or below 2, that means their metabolic rate are very, very high. As the age increases, okay, so your lean body mass decreases, okay, and the adipose tissues increases. Okay, so in that case, what exactly happened? The BMR decreases by 2% per decade after 21 years of age. That means if the person is of 21 years of age, after every 10 years, their metabolism rate is going to decrease by 2%. This is the very important part which you have to learn. And metabolic rate is very high during the years of growth, that is infancy and adolescence. Adolescence is what? It is the peak of adolescence and reduces later since the rapid growth decreases. Okay. Now in later phases, what happens? Muscle tone decreases. There's a reduction in muscle mass, and also these are the various reasons why the metabolic rate is lowered in later years. Okay. The next factor is the gender. Fine. Now females have always less lean body mass. Okay. So, and they have a very high fat percentage. Body fat percentage is very high. So there is a 5% lower BMR than men. Okay. These are the figures which you should be learning. Fine. Now there are more testosterone in males, which actually decreases the high body fat. So they have more metabolic rate than the females. Now young adults, basically young adult male contains almost 14% of the fat, and young adult female on the contrary is having 23 to 32% of fat. So you can see there is a vast difference in the body fat among the genders. Now after 45 years of age, there is a reduction in hormones, okay, and therefore there is a drop in metabolic rate in both the sexes. Okay, if the person is at the age of 45, there is a reduction in hormones, and therefore there is a drop in BMR in both the sexes. Now female BMR also decreases further because there is a hormonal changes after menopause. Okay. Next is the factor which is called body size. So body size, that means you can say that 80% of the energy is coming from the glucose and fat, which is lost as a heat, right? So you can see that the almost 80% of the energy is coming from the fat, from the glucose, and the fat is lost by the heat. Almost 15% of the heat loss is from the skin. So you can see if the person is having higher body size, big body size, there is a greater loss of heat from the skin. The remaining heat loss occurs from the lungs and through the excreta. So a tall people have higher BMI than lean and short people due to the higher surface area and muscle content. So if the body is having a very high surface area, that means the metabolic rate is going to be higher. The next factor which we'll talk about is physiological conditions. The physiological conditions are what? They are, first I'll talk about pregnancy. Okay, so pregnancy, there is an increase in the maternal tissues, okay, and increase in the fetal activity, and also there is an increase in hormone which will actually work on the metabolism rate. And in the first trimester, there is a decrease, all the activities decreases due to the low fetal activity and large nutritive requirement. Now there is an increase in the size of the fetus and maternal tissues, and so all these conditions increases the metabolic rate. Almost average of 20% increment has been seen in pregnant ladies. The second physiological condition is the lactation period. Compared to the pregnancy, BMR falls during lactation. Why? Because there is no tissue synthesis and there's only milk synthesis. So compared to non-pregnancy state, actually it increases, but it doesn't increases when we compare it with the pregnancy. So in the pregnancy, most of the metabolic rate is increased and then it is decreased in the lactating phase. The next factor is the stress. Now, if the body is having very higher metabolic conditions like burns, accident, or simple physiological conditions, you have physiological stress, or you can say if the person is having fever even, there is an increase in metabolic rate because there is a hypermetabolic conditions in your body. There are various stress hormones which is epinephrine and norepinephrine. Also affects the cellular BMR, that is basal metabolic rate. Next factor is the endocrine glands. Now there is a hyperactivity of endocrine glands. If there is a very much higher activity of endocrine glands, the BMR will increase, and if the activity level is down, then there is a decrease in basal metabolic rate. Now you can see that hyperactivity reduces and hyperactivity increases the metabolic rate. So it depends कि endocrine glands are how much affected. Now this is the question which actually comes in few years back. That is, what is the metabolic rate, reduction in metabolic rate while the person is sleeping. So this is 7 to 10% reduction in normal sound sleep. If the person is not having a good sleep, their metabolic rate is getting down because you feel all the time dizzy and sleepy the whole day. Next, we'll talk about the temperature. Now, in the low environmental temperature, what exactly happens? You start shivering. What do you do? When you feel cold, you start shivering. Fine? You shiver, induce the heat generation. Your body heat is being secured when you shiver. And this what exactly happened? That increases the metabolic rate. And this is called a cold induced thermogenesis. Right? In infants, there is no shivering adaptation. Have you ever seen any infant shivering so much? No, not exactly, because they have brown adipose tissue in addition to white adipose tissues. Okay, and your body temperature, that means if your body temperature increases, especially in the fever condition, an elevation in the body temperature above 37 degree or 98.5 increases the metabolic rate by 13%. This is the question also which came few years back. What is the increment in metabolic rate when the person is getting fever? So it is what? 13% increment of metabolic rate, and you can say with each degree Celsius there is a 7% each degree Fahrenheit. If you have, when we talk about Fahrenheit, there is around 7% increment, and when we talk about Celsius, it is 13%. So you, whenever you just attend the questions, just check on what the question is asking. Is it asking about the Celsius or is it talking about Fahrenheit? Because for Celsius, there's an increment in 13% and there's an increment of 7% when we talk about Fahrenheit. Next is the pharmacological agents. Fine. So there are various medicines which boosts your immune system, and as it increases your immune system, your metabolism rate is also increased. Amphetamines, which are used to treat obesity, also increases, while sedatives decreases your metabolism rate. So amphetamines, which treats your obesity, increases the metabolic rate, and sedatives, which help you to sleep a lot, decreases your metabolic rate. Now there are various other things which is to be noted, that is nicotine and caffeine. They also increases your energy expenditure by small measurable amounts. Okay, beta blockers, which have been used to treat hypertension, may lead to a slight decrease in the energy expenditure, and so there is a tendency to gain weight. Fine. So beta blockers also decreases your metabolic rate. Next factor which has to be taken care is the state of nature. Now after very long prolongation of calories under nutrition, that means if you're not taking much of calories from your food, the BMR also falls at least around 20 to 30%. Fine. So if you're fasting for a long time or you're not taking a lot of calories, there's a low of BMR by 20 to 30%. And this is reflected by the body's adaptive effort to conserve energy when there is a deficit. So BMR is affected by food consumption, overfeeding increasing, and BMR is decreases if you underfeed yourself by 5 to 10%. So those people who are obese, if they think that they'll not eat, they just underfed themselves, they are going to reduce their weight. No. Why? Because your metabolism is also been decreased and your energy requirement is also been decreased. So whatever your amount is you're eating, that is too much for you. So for those people who are obese, they need to increase their metabolic rate so that their requirements have been fulfilled and they reduce their weight. The next factor which we'll talk about is the smoking. Now when habitual smokers stop smoking, there's a tendency to gain weight. Okay? And this nicotine, basically what it happens, it increases the metabolic rate by 10%. That doesn't mean that you start smoking. No. So, but you should be knowing that nicotine actually increases the metabolism rate by 10%. Next is the physiological state. That means if your anxiety levels are higher, that means you're increasing your epinephrine secretions, and this also increases the metabolic rate. There are various diseases which also affects your metabolic rate. That means that if the metabolic rate increases in fever, tumors and burns, in all the cases your metabolic rate is increased. There's a mechanism which is called intracellular signaling agents, which is known as cytokines. If they are increased, there is an increase in the metabolic rate also. Okay, so these are the things which are important, and in our next session we'll talk about the second chapter, that is properties of food. So till then, study well and happy learning.